Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a source that asks a really tough question about the Indian media. Who actually decides what counts as news? And maybe more importantly, whose stories get left out entirely? So it all kicks off with this story about two different protests, both focused on the very same government policy. On one side, you had a group mostly from what are known as upper castes protesting against the policy. They got wall-to-wall media coverage. On the other side, a group from historically marginalized lower castes peacefully demonstrating in favor of it. And according to the source, they were met with, well, pretty much a wall of silence. So what's the deal here? Was this just a coincidence, a random choice by editors? Well, the source we're looking at argues no way. This is a symptom of something much deeper. And some people, like the politician Rahul Gandhi, say if you want to understand the coverage, you've got to look at who's inside the newsroom in the first place. Yeah, he's actually made it a habit to put journalists on the spot, directly asking them about the diversity, or lack of it, in their own offices. He points to the fact that you just don't see people from marginalized communities like Dalits or from the other backward classes or OBCs, which is a term for a huge group of historically disadvantaged communities. Okay, so let's get into the hard numbers here. The source points to this really important survey from back in 2006. This was one of the first real attempts to get a clear picture of who was calling the shots. You know, the editors, the bureau chiefs, the people who actually have the power to decide what gets on the front page or leads the nightly news. And here is the million-dollar question, right? When they looked for people from the most historically marginalized communities in all of India, what did they find? The answer was 0. Out of 315 of the most powerful positions in Indian media, not a single one was held by a person from a Dalit or Adivasi community. Not one. And this chart, wow, it just lays out how stark that is. See that massive purple section? That's the upper castes. They make up about 16% of India's population, but held a whopping 86% of the top media jobs. Now look at that tiny little blue sliver. That's the OBCs, who make up more than half the country's population, holding just 4% of those same jobs. Okay, so that was 2006. You'd think that in over a decade, things would have shifted, right? Well, let's fast forward to 2019, when another major study decided to ask that exact question. This time, it was a report from Oxfam India and the media site News Laundry, and they took another deep look at who was running the show in India's most important media organizations. So here we go again. After 13 years of this being a known issue, of all the talk and debate, had the door finally opened for Dalit and Adivasi leaders in the media? You're not going to believe this. The answer, 13 years later, was exactly the same, 0. A big, fat 0%. The door hadn't budged an inch. And this chart really drives it home. Things didn't just stay the same. The concentration of power actually increased. The share of top jobs held by upper castes went up to 88%. For the most marginalized groups, the needle wasn't just stuck. It was basically glued to 0. And this wasn't just about who was in the corner office. I mean, look at this. You turn on a primetime TV debate, 0 anchors from any of these marginalized communities. And who's actually writing the news you read? In the major English papers, less than 5% of the articles were written by Dalits or Adivasis. Their stories just weren't being told by them. So when you just put the two surveys right next to each other, the picture is, well, it's pretty stunning. 13 years apart, 2 different studies, and the core numbers are basically identical. The system looks like it's been frozen in time. All right, so we've seen a lot of numbers, but so what? Why does any of this actually matter? Well, this is where the source connects all those dots, bringing us right back to those 2 protests we started with. The argument here is pretty simple and pretty powerful. Step 1, the newsrooms are filled with people from one social group. Step 2, when that group protests, it's treated as major news. Step 3, when another group protests peacefully about the exact same issue, you hear crickets. And step 4, what you get is a completely warped picture of what the public actually thinks. This all leads to a really uncomfortable question that the source poses. Think about it. The lower caste protest was peaceful. The other protest was described as being on the edge of violence. Is the media only willing to pay attention to marginalized groups when they fit a certain chaotic stereotype while totally ignoring their peaceful, organized dissent? And the source wraps up with a pretty stark prediction. It basically says that these communities, they see this. They see the media blackout. And while they may not get their voices heard on the nightly news, they're going to make them heard somewhere else, in the voting booth. And that leaves us with the big, lingering question at the heart of all this. If the people who are supposed to hold a mirror up to society don't actually look like that society, can the reflection they show us ever really be true?